Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Minimalism Made Simple podcast. My name is Rebecca, and I am the blogger over at minimalismmadesimple.com. I encourage you to head over and check out that website as I have several worksheets and checklists for you to print absolutely for free. So, thank you for tuning in today, and let's get started with today's episode. Hey everyone, thank you for joining today. So today's episode is going to be about minimalist budgeting tips. So I have 10 simple minimalist budgeting tips for you to try. So budgeting can be a hard thing to do, especially with the daily financial demands of family, children, and just unavoidable expenses in general. So during my journey to minimalism, I learned how important it was to downsize and realized that I need to start changing my spending habits once and for all. So if you want to start living a simple life and learn the value of living with less, here are some minimalist budgeting tips that have helped me along the way, and I'm hoping that they can benefit you as well. You can implement these tips little by little, and they're just going to serve as a guide to get you to save more and spend less. So the first tip that I have for you today is to have a serious talk with yourself. One of the biggest aspects of minimal living is to identify what your goals are going to be. Now, while this may seem difficult, it really doesn't have to be. A huge part of the process is to be honest about what you want and where you're going. When having this talk with yourself, you can set boundaries for your financial outlook and stick with them. So if there's no willingness to stick with the boundaries, minimalist budgeting just is impossible. Setting these financial goals will help you to create a solid list of priorities to meet. The second tip that I have for you today is to distance yourself from financial distractions. So financial distractions lurk in every corner of our homes, on our television, in our email, even in traditional mail, we still receive financial distractions, marketing, companies that want to sell us something. So these forms of marketing are meant to trap people into spending more money than they need to. And this could be a dangerous situation for someone who is trying to live on a minimalist budget. So the point is to not completely avoid financial distractions, because of course we're not able to do that 100%, but basically to try to distance yourself from these financial distractions. And this will help you to really stay on track. Tip number 3 is to put a stop to unnecessary spending. So the absolute biggest key to minimalist budgeting is to ensure that unnecessary purchases aren't made. And this could be anything from impulse buys or even overindulgence in spending. It is critical that the question is asked, do I need this? Now, there are many things that we may think that we need that could be considered unnecessary. So, for example, when you go to make a purchase, really ask yourself, do I need this, and does this serve me purpose? These purchases, these unnecessary purchases, really put a dent into the goals and priorities that we have set up for minimalist budgeting. So this is discouraging, and it could cause us to actually slip back into a lifestyle of mindless spending. And we really want to stay on track, as I mentioned before, and we really want to just be able to make purchases that serve us purpose. And this is so important. Tip number 4 is to focus on owning things. So borrowing only leads to owing, which leads to debt. And this terrible cycle is something that keeps many out of the minimalist budgeting mindset. So to achieve this, it is critical to focus on owning things. And I always like to say that the more that is owned, the less that is owed. Now, this may sound overly simple. However, it's so easy to fall into the trap of owing things. Maybe if we want to purchase a new car, if we want to purchase a new home, we owe payments, we owe mortgage. So it's really easy for us to get caught up in this cycle. And the focus of owning things really puts us out of this mindset and really helps us to focus on what is ours to actually keep the money that we earn. Tip number 5 is to limit yourself to one financial account. So the overstated saying less is more really is applicable when it comes to minimalist budgeting or minimalist living in general. So what I mean by sticking to one account, I mean your checking account. And to kind of just stop using those credit cards altogether. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that credit cards are very beneficial when it comes to emergencies or something that we really need to purchase. But if we're using our credit cards on a day-to-day basis, we are not really being smart about our budgeting, because then at the end of the month we're owing interest unless we pay it off in full. And how many times do people say they're going to pay their credit card off in full, but it kind of never ends up happening? By using just our checking account, we can really keep track of the limits that we have. And limiting ourselves is not always a bad thing. Limiting ourselves really helps us to stay focused and to spend only what is needed and not what is wanted. Tip number 6 is to shoot for predetermined payments. So having a direct debit set up to process payments automatically will enforce budget boundaries. So if you know for sure that you have money coming out to pay for important things like loans or bills or things like that, you will inherently know that you must limit spending that particular week. So not only does this foster a healthy budgeting plan, but it will help keep you responsible for paying things on time, because nobody wants to pay a late payment, right? So this is definitely important when it comes to budgeting. Tip number 7 is to make a budget plan. So making a budget plan is important to keep track with minimalist budgeting. So I always say that a good plan or a good strategy will help guide you towards success. So this includes accounting for weekly expenses you know you'll have, like gas, groceries, monthly utilities, bills, etc. And having this list readily available will keep all minimalist budgeting concepts at the forefront. So I always say, sit down, take the time, and make a plan, because this is really going to help you in the future. Tip number 8 is to be aware of any future purchases. So this tip really focuses on the debate between needing and wanting. So be aware of any future purchases that you may have. Do you have any purchases planned within the next year? Then what I want you to do is consider whether or not they fall into one or two of these categories, which is the needing or the wanting. So this really helps you to set up your priorities and to question the decision. And it's okay to go ahead and question a decision or a plan that you may have for the future, because this helps us to make the right decisions with our finances. Moving on to tip number 9, which is to spend less than what you make. Now, I know this sounds so obvious, but it is so critical to actually implement it. And you'd be surprised how many people actually don't implement this, and how sometimes we're guilty of not implementing it as well. So falling into debt holes that become too deep starts with spending more than what people make. Now, affordable finances are achievable, and having the right mindset is important. This means knowing that just because you need to spend less, it isn't going to be terrible. So it will be for the greater good of happiness through minimal budgeting and through minimal spending. And now for our last tip today, tip number 10, which is less room is needed. Now, this is one of my favorite tips because it really supports a minimalist lifestyle. So when sticking to a minimalist lifestyle, this often leads to the shrinkage of excessive things in our life. When approaching this concept, it especially helps the minimalist budgeting, because small apartments or houses mean less money will be spent. So this helps to make the transition into minimalist budgeting all the more exciting and meaningful. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a small house or a small apartment to implement it, but really just allowing yourself to have more space in general. So getting rid of all those excessive things is the key to this tip. And there you have it. Those are my 10 minimalist budgeting tips for beginners. So I hope that these tips can help to guide you towards creating a minimalist budget and to help you reach your goals. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And I want to remind you that you can head on over to my website at minimalismmadesimple.com to download some freebies that I have for you, which are workbooks and checklists that can help guide you on your minimalist journey. I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye-bye.